All right, you're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. We learned today that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and their director, Lee Zeldin, is eliminating the 2009 Obama EPA endangerment finding, which set in motion most federal greenhouse gas emission standards for vehicles. The 2009 development was an EPA finding that carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and 3 other greenhouse gases endanger the public health and welfare of current and future generations. It came under the Clean Air Act, leading to a slew of restrictions and regulations. So we wanted to discuss this tonight. Let's bring in Jean Chemnick. Jean is with Politico. And I gotta just first do a little primer here for the audience. For viewers who have not followed this closely, Jean, what exactly is the greenhouse gas endangerment finding, and why has it been so central to U.S. climate policy?
Well, it's the scientific declaration that underpins most greenhouse gas rules, not just for vehicles, but also for power plants, oil and gas development under the Clean Air Act. And it is a scientific declaration. It says that human emissions are endangering public health and welfare by driving climate change. But it is also a legal predicate for all of those rules and makes them possible, and has for 16 years.
So what specifically is the White House proposing to repeal or revise, and through what mechanism are they doing it?
Yeah, they are repealing this finding, which is an Obama era finding that made those rules possible. The argument that they're going to go with is that the Clean Air Act doesn't allow for the regulation of pollution that is globally harmful, like greenhouse gases are when they drive climate change. That it only allows for the regulation of emissions that are harmful if you inhale them or you're directly exposed to them. And so they'll argue that. They'll argue that U.S. emissions are only a tiny portion of global emissions, and so they don't warrant regulation. They will not say anything about science. They did in the proposal, but I've learned that they are not going to go with a critique of the science, even though the president has been very critical of the science that underlies the original endangerment finding, even though it's based on a very robust record of science linking emissions to harmful warming.
How, and maybe we haven't heard from automakers yet, but I'm curious, what are we hearing from, and I'm curious, how are energy companies and automakers responding to this? Is there any consensus in those industries or their divisions?
There are differences of opinion from company to company, but generally speaking, industry is not super supportive of getting rid of the endangerment finding for a number of reasons. This isn't really driven by industry, at least most companies, because it could potentially remove some preemption of state laws. State regulations make it easier for individual states to regulate especially vehicle emissions, and it could open them up to some new litigation. All of that will be hashed out in the courts, as will the actual repeal of the finding. We're going to probably have 2 years of litigation that will determine whether this even stands up, going all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Assuming this moves forward, how quickly would it face court challenges? Is that clear to us?
The first challenges to this are already filed now, seconds after basically it was repealed. But it'll first go to the U.S. District Court of Appeals. It depends on what happens there. It could be thrown out for a number of different reasons. There is a feeling that the Supreme Court is more conservative than it was in 2007 when this precedent was established with Massachusetts versus EPA. So if the court takes it up, there is a good chance that they'll side with EPA.
What message, Jean, does this send globally, especially as other major economies, they're doubling down on their efforts to limit greenhouse gases?
I mean, the U.S. retreat on policy has had something of a chilling effect globally on efforts to contain climate change. Although, as you point out, a lot of countries are not retreating in the same way. Canada and even China, which has been cagey about its positions in the past, is building a whole lot of renewables. So, I mean, this is not a popular position internationally. And there's a sense that the U.S. is shirking its responsibilities.
All right. Jean Chemnick with us tonight with Politico. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
You bet. All right. Let's hit one other quick commercial break. Our coverage continuing in a moment.